Meeting. I think we have a full complement of our member councillors, and we welcome Councillor McDonald, who's visiting, Councillor Barton-Lumsden, who's visiting, and that's all. No leave of absence or apologies. Someone like to move the confirmation of minutes? Moved by Councillor Owen Jones, seconded by Councillor Gail O'Neill. Take the vote. All in favour? Against? Carried. Conflict of interest declarations. Councillor Gates.
Thanks, Chairman. Item 6.4 today, I will be leaving the room due to receipt of donations from both UPS, who are consultants to the project, and from whom I received a donation of $18.50 in 14, 15 and 16, albeit 16 was fully refunded, and from Mitchell, Ray and Arcadis over the same time frame, which presents a prescribed interest even though it was fully refunded. So I'll be departing the room.
Okay, thank you. Any other conflicts of interest? Councillor Vorster.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman. Just conflict of interest, it's a declarable one on item 6.2, strategy for outstanding major update 2 and 3 items, part B. Mr. Chairman, I wouldn't ordinarily make this declaration, but I do intend to ask some questions of city officers. So in order to address a perception issue, I'm declaring the following. My wife and I own a small investment unit in Palm Beach, not on the Gold Coast Highway, a suburb through which the 4th stage of the light rail is proposed to travel. If we could just scroll up, please. Thank you very much. While the project stands to affect a significant number of people in the local government area and so may be considered an ordinary business matter pursuant to section 150 EF2A of the Local Government Act, very recent media commentary during the federal election campaign has heightened community interest in the future of the project and may now create a perception issue which some may believe ought now be managed. A reasonable person may form the view I have an interest in any council strategy or plan to amend the planning scheme along the future corridor given this property interest. If we could just scroll down, apart from myself, my wife has an interest in this. She's also an electoral donor from a joint account, owner of this investment property in Palm Beach. The donations are listed there. Just scroll down. I'm seeking permission to participate in the decision-making regarding this process on the basis that the 4th stage of the light rail will affect a significant number of people within the local government area. Just within the corridor, besides those who live along earlier stages. For that reason, my consistent approach has been that this project is an ordinary business item and requires no declaration. That said, the media commentary concerning the federal election may have created new perceptions which need to be managed. I do that voluntarily. The light rail is a multi-decade city-shaping project that demands intense interrogation. Sorry? Oh. Yeah.
I was just trying to check which item.
6.2. And councillors, you would read that report and think that there is no nexus between the 4th stage of the light rail and the report. However, I've got a question on the 4th stage of the light rail that falls out of this report. And because it deals with potential planning scheme changes, and I own an investment property in that corridor, I just want to make sure that I'm acting in an abundance of caution. In any case, this decision will also be informed by my insights as a long-term councillor and public transport advocate.
Okay, thank you. Anyone want to move a motion in relation to that? Councillor Hamill.
Mr. Chair, I think Councillor Vorster nailed it in between that it's an ordinary business item, so I'm happy for him to participate in the decision because it's an ordinary business item, acknowledging his declaration.
Well, I'm happy to take some words.
Chairman, could we have some clarity on that? I don't
I'm
believe
just-
this is an ordinary
I'm just
business
looking it up
item
at
at
the same
this point
time.
in time. I don't have an objection
please.
to councillor Vorster remaining in the room, but it's not at this point in time an ordinary business item.
The director's telling me that we've got some advice from General Counsel in relation to this.
Oh, good.
Yeah, through you, Mr Chair. So we do have some advice from General Counsel that items 6.1 to 6.3 are all considered ordinary business matters, so the conflict of interest provisions don't apply to those items.
So can the wording be as simple that we acknowledge councillor Vorster's declaration, but due to advice that it's an ordinary business matter, that his participation in the matter continues?
Through you, Mr Chair, I think if we just say that despite the councillor's conflict of interest, because the item is considered an ordinary business matter.
I don't think there's any need to get any more complicated than that, Director.
I think that would cover it, Mr Chair, because the item is considered an ordinary business matter. Trina?
significant number of people, it becomes ordinary.
And interestingly, during the week I saw something where you could use a radius to work out how many people were in 10 kilometres of where you lived. And so there are 258,000 Gold Coasters who share the same conflict with you.
I know. And had the Mayor during the federal election campaign not made a big
But
deal about...
irrelevant.
No, I realise...
Relevant to you, but I think irrelevant to the conversation.
Totally.
So when you say small investment property,
I mean, a single 70 square metre unit.
excellent.
It's got a balcony.
Best in my experience to be extremely cautious, although sometimes an abundance of caution allows you to do its contrary.
But this is something you share with a whole lot of other Gold Coasters, so that's the good.
Yes.
I'm happy with that, Mr Chair, if there's a agreement.
Second.
Do you mind, Councillor Hamill, if we, for the sake of being consistent with what seems to be the advice that's been given, that we say that it's an ordinary business matter pursuant to,
The section.
and then the section
Yep.
of the Local Government Act?
Oh, I don't know what's happening now.
And Mr Chairman, while we're waiting for that, we've just been advised that, and I haven't seen it in the media reports, but I've been advised by someone who would know that Stephen Miles has just announced a 75% scheme termination threshold for community title schemes to be unwound. 75%
Does
apparently.
that help you with your small investment?
No, we're talking about housing affordability today. 75%, it's very low.
Cat, meat pigeons. Oh, so body corporates where you've previously required 100% is now been reduced to 75%, and then you can steal somebody's castle. Outrageous.
Happy with that, Mr Chair?
Worried about
Yeah,
auxiliary
so then just add to that of the Local Government
Worried
Act
about this.
after the second
Yep, yep.
of the Local Government Act.
By the way, auxiliary housing was the name that we were looking for the other day. Alleged.
Okay. All right, councillors. Happy with that, Councillor Hamill?
Absolutely.
Since I helped formulate it, I'll go second. Anyone want to speak to that? Take the vote. All in favour? Councillor Hamill, Councillor Owen Jones, Councillor Gates, Councillor O'Neill, Councillor Peter Young, Councillor Pauline Young, Councillor Caldwell. Against? And Councillor Vorster did not vote. Any other declarations, Councillor Vorster? Any other declarations, councillors? All right, thanks. We've got item 6.1 and 6.4, which are both starred. I think we'll just unstar both of those. And then Councillor Young wants to speak to 6.4, so, and Councillor Gates needs to leave the room. I propose that we deal with the matters out of order so that we can deal with the DA first. So, Councillor Gates, do you want to depart now, we'll deal with 6.4.
And Chair, I wasn't necessarily looking for a presentation
Right,
unless
well,
my
are you happy
colleagues...
to, if you're happy to move it, then you can just speak to
Yes,
it. Okay,
yeah.
moved by councillor Pauline Young, second by councillor Owen Jones.
Thanks, Chair. I was nearly going to stand up then. Look, this particular application has possibly been ongoing for maybe 18 months to 2 years over different iterations. It started with an approval on the lot 264, which was for a tall, slender building, a little bit under the height allowance with the uplift. And then 266 was an application that came forward to our planning officers, which the applicant chose not to take on the advice of the officers to achieve an outcome. So that was a refusal, which subsequently went through to the Planning and Environment Court, but did not proceed from there. And the applicant for 264 purchased the site on 266, and which has led to a result here that is so well supported by our planning scheme and achieves the outcomes that we look to see in that coastal strip. So potentially we could have had 2 tall, slender buildings there with very limited outdoor areas, very limited planting, but still achieving the outcomes that the city plan desired. But the applicant chose to work very closely with our planners on every aspect, every information request, every opportunity that they had to work with the planners to get the result that we have here today. So we have a building that's 25 storeys, 101 units, but we're going to have 206 car spaces. We've got a lot of deep planting, we've got a lot of landscaping around the building. We've got a wonderful architectural outcome, a very high quality. I find it difficult to pronounce his name. I think it's Koichi Takada, who also designed out the Norfolk building at Burleigh and the Luna building at Burleigh. It reflects the existing and emerging amenity of the coastal strip there. We have, I believe it's 5 buildings that actually exceed the height limit based back on approvals on previous plans. So this building not only presents beautifully architecturally, it's a wonderful urban renewal of the site there. It's a large site. The building's very centrally located. It provides a diversity of offerings, housing offerings going forward with 2-bedroom units up to 4-bedroom units at the rear as to the front. So there's hinterland views, there's ocean views. It's in walking distance to our public infrastructure, our transport. It's reflective of what we expect to see in this area. It's achieved the outcome of that coastal strip there. We are on that strip there, we are looking at high density. I was at a breakfast this morning where our CEO spoke. Close on 40% of the city's population dwells within some type of multi-dwelling building. So we are catering to the asking here within the city is that 40% of our population is living in some multi-dwelling offering. This is a building that fits with the city plan. We have an applicant who has chosen to work with our officers to achieve this outcome, and over a period of probably more than 18 months, we've worked periodically with the applicant and have achieved this outcome, which I believe is something that we will be able to measure back to going into the future for the quality of product that we're looking for in the area. And I also think it supports the fact that the city plan works, and it works very well to give an outcome within our city for the quality and offering that we are looking within our coastal strip area. Thank you.
Very good. Thank you, Councillor Young. Anyone else want to speak for or against? Councillor Owen Jones.
I just want to It is in the high-density area, and clearly it's a good outcome, and I think that it actually does meet all of the requirements in regards to the uplift. But I did notice the extent of the submissions against it and the spread from where they'd had been received, and initially I thought it was quite strange that they were so spread out in Australia, and then it was clear that it's the timeshare next door in regards to Mariner Shores, and the owners of Mariner Shores effectively have the same rights to redevelopment in accordance with the city plan as what the owners of this property have. So I think that the reasons for their objections may be more about impacts on their visual connection to the ocean because of how far back their property is currently set, but there may come a time sometime in the future where those same set of owners that are complaining and have lodged complaints in regards to this application may collectively seek to have a different outcome in regards to their rather large site in regards to both density and height and the location of the buildings. So I think that all things considered, whilst it's quite a large volume of submitters against it, I think that the way that it's been managed in regards to the current city plan makes sense.
Okay, thank you. Right, any other speakers for or against? I was just going to contribute that obviously this site has been through a journey and we've ended up with a very good looking design, but I'm also equally happy that in an environment where we want to be providing affordable and diverse housing choices, we are seeing a range of unit typologies within each of the floor plates, which I think will mean that we're not just touching the premium end of the market, but there will be more affordable entry-level units as well, which I think is great because it means that more Gold Coasters can live in these great suburbs on the coastline. Any other comments? All right, we'll take the vote. All in favour? Against? Carried. Okay, welcome back, Councillor Gates. So we've got 3 strategic planning items that relate to city plan amendments. Now, Catherine, I think we wanted to actually, did you still want to deal with them in reverse order? So starting with 6.3? Yes, please. Okay. So, councillors, if there's no objections to that, Catherine's asked if we could just reverse the order. So we'll move to item 6.3 first. Gav, are you presenting on these or are you just... Yeah.
Through chairs.
All right.
Through the chair, good morning, councillors. My presentation today deals with agenda item 6.3, provides details of the minister's decision approving major update 2 and 3 in part. And as part of the presentation, we're seeking council's approval to adopt the amendment package consistent with the minister's decision, with supporting major update to the city plan policies amendment package. As you may be aware, this amendment has been referred to as the Our City, Our Plan, so it contains both the major update 2 and 3 and the major update to the city plan policies. By way of an update on the amendment, you may recall in February 2021 that Council resolved to proceed to a 4th round of consultation, and that commenced on 9th of March and ended on the 8th of April. In accordance with the resolution, given there were no significantly different changes to the amendment in response to the submissions, we proceeded to an informal state officer interest review. Following our engagement with the state officers, we acted under the delegation and has submitted the amendment package to the Minister for approval to adopt. Following the submission to the state, we continued to engage with the officers, and that included a response to the request for further information that we made in late April in 2022. There's the details there. As you can with respect to the Minister's decision, on the 17th of October, we received the Minister's decision approving the amendment in part. 20 of the 34 items have been approved by the Minister with 5 conditions. Part B confirms that 13 of the items are unable to be supported by the Minister at this time. You see the slide before you shows the items that have been approved by the Minister. And there are 5 conditions that are required to be complied with prior to adoption. Officers have updated the amendment to comply with these conditions as contained within attachment 3 and 4 to the agenda item. The slide 5 before you shows the items that are unable to be supported by the Minister. And as outlined in the Minister's decision, the main concerns were primarily with respect to item 9 and 11 within the package, being the built form improvements and the light rail overlay provisions. Based on the evidence submitted to date, the Minister is unable to conclude the extent these changes will impact housing supply and if the changes will impact market feasibility and therefore lead to the constriction of the supply of housing. Whilst the Minister was supportive of the targeted growth provisions in the city, the Minister held concerns with respect to the site cover trigger for impact assessment in that locality and is concerned that it had the potential to restrict the delivery of housing and providing a regulatory barrier for the change. There were a number of items separate to those matters that were also supported by the Minister. However, outlined in the Minister's decision, these were interconnected with policy items 9 and 11, and it was identified that these changes had the potential to cause issues with the workability of the planning scheme. As a consequence of the Minister's decision for major update package 2 and 3, we also made corresponding changes to the city plan policies to carry forward the items that were approved, or the policy to support the items approved under major update 2 and 3, and there's a short outline of those details in the agenda report and on the screen currently. With respect to the items that have been approved for adoption by the Minister, is the Officer's recommendation that we proceed to adopt the major update package 2 and 3 in accordance with the Minister's decision and conditions, and adopt the City Plan Policies Amendment Package which supports 2 and 3 with a commencement date of the 4th of July 2023. Are there any questions?
Yeah, there will be. Sorry, did we also include that extra paragraph in the resolution with the Minute Secretary as yet? Yeah. Okay, thanks. All right, we'll move to questions. Councillor Peter Young.
Thanks, Chairman. Simple question. That's item 17 was the deletion of investigation areas, which has been supported by the Minister. So what specific investigation areas were they, please?
Through you, Mr Chair, Councillor Young, there were 2 investigation areas that were removed from the mapping detail. One was in Whittian Road in Carrara, it's my understanding, which transferred into a low-density large lot precinct. And if you just bear with me, I've got the details for the second one.
Was it Major Bar? Or?
So the ones we've dealt with.
Yeah. Okay.
Yes, that's right.
I just want to articulate that so there's no question whatsoever.
Yep.
Thanks very much, Chair.
Gavin's hanging in there.
Is that, pardon me?
Gavin's hanging in there.
And Highland Park.
And Highland Park. Okay, we'll just move to the recommendation. So in the printed version that's on page 83, you'll see that we only had 6 paragraphs. Sorry, we just, okay. Yeah, did you want to just touch on what our thoughts were in adding that extra paragraph.
Through you, Chair, that's fine. As outlined in the agenda report, we did publish a consultation report in parallel with the submission of the package for adoption to the Minister. At that time, we presented a tailored response to all of the to all the submitters, confirming the outcomes of the amendment. In the circumstances where the last time we've been to Council to facilitate the fourth round of consultation, and the fact that we have currently met our obligations under the Minister's guidelines and rules, we think it would be a helpful and informative way to let the community know of the decision that the Minister has made to adopt the changes in part, and to be able to write to the submitters to confirm Council's position today.
Thank you. And so, sorry, if we turn to page 71 of the agenda, that has the outline of the number of submissions.
Through you, Mr Chair, that's right. There were 2,130 submissions across 4 rounds of consultation, which gave rise to 24,000 points of submission. So there was a lot of public interest through the process, and they probably would not all be aware. We have, as part of progressing the changes to Council, published the Minister's decision on the website, and we've been addressing community members as they come along. But the ability to provide a more comprehensive update to the community would be a positive for the community.
So, councillors, just that bottom, you'll see the bottom number of each of those 4 columns adds up to the 2,000, whatever it is.
That's correct, through you, Chair.
Okay. Councillor Vorster, then Councillor Barton-Lumsden.
Thank you very much, Mr Chairman. Mr Chairman, my personal view is that this has been a hatchet job on the part of the Minister, and what we've been asked to endorse today, adopt the city plan, is a compromised outcome, at least from a community perspective. We did a lot of work. We went out to consultation on so many occasions, and rather than heeding the advice of Gold Coasters, I think we've had a decision from George Street that's trashed it. My concern is that if we do write to submitters, and I support doing so, but my concern is if we write to submitters and advise them in a very clinical way of what's happened, that Council's adopted this and here's the Minister's decision, we're not going to properly explain to the community that, number one, this was not Council's desired outcome, and number two, that our hand was effectively forced, and number three, that the state really should now be responsible. So I guess what I'm saying is that we've had a really good process. The community consultation was very robust, and we've done our darndest to develop an amendment package that seizes opportunity but fulfills community aspiration and is tempered by present concerns. We've done some heavy lifting. Given that Amendment Package 2 and 3 is so compromised, in my view, I would hate for those submitters to believe that we're complicit in that compromise. And my question, Mr Chairman, through you to city officers, is when we do write to these submitters, what exactly are we going to be saying about Council's position and Council's preference for the amendment package to have been adopted in full, and what the consequences may now be for the city?
Through you, Mr Chair, Councillor Vorster, I acknowledge your concerns and your statements made. Officers are able to tailor up a solution or a response in a letter that does address some of those concerns. It's really a matter of the extent of information that you'd like us to provide.
So, Mr Chairman, I can't provide a direction to city officers, but what I think is critically important in the communication is that to the extent an item has not been adopted by the Minister, I think it's important to explain what the consequence of the Minister not adopting that measure would be. And it could just be a bullet point. You know, the Minister's decided not to do this, here are the consequences, and to address the fallout, what we're proposing is a new process and a new way forward.
Through you, Mr Chair, I completely understand your perspective. I guess As part of today's agenda items, we also have an item that deals with the outstanding items. There are a number of decisions that the council needs to make as to how those things may progress. So we can certainly provide you an understanding of the consequences of those items not proceeding in the amendment package or the next version of the city plan. But for us to make any informed decisions as to the future intent of council for those changes may be a little bit difficult to undertake at this point in time until such time as we've proceeded to engage with you more and spoken with the state to understand how those matters may be able to be progressed. So I completely agree, but it'll be a challenge to completely close that solution, if that makes sense.
So, Mr Chairman, perhaps rather than including it in the letter, if there's some resistance to that, on the GC Have Your Say page that hosted the community consultation on the amendment package, the system through which many submissions were made, it would be useful to have a fact sheet of sorts which explained which items were not adopted as part of 2 and 3 and what the consequences are of effectively the minister's direction. So if it's not to be in the letter, I still think that document needs to exist somewhere publicly so that when residents do have concerns about housing affordability, housing supply, design outcomes, we can at least point them to a single point of truth to explain that we tried to do everything within our power to secure these outcomes, but the state intervened and retarded that progress.
Through you, Mr Chair, I think that's something that we could certainly undertake. Maybe perhaps as part of making those updates and those fact sheet arrangements, we could also welcome the community to keep track of the website as policy items progress and we have an understanding more clearly as to how they might end up in the future, and perhaps try and make that engagement more regular and frequent.
Councillor Belden-Lumsden, then Councillor McDonald, then Councillor Owen-Jones.
Thank you, Chair. Similar to what Councillor Vorster said, it's quite disappointing that our officers had engaged with the state so early and worked through all the different items of our package, and then the state gave us obviously the go-ahead to lodge, and now we've got all these concerns about various items and it's holding up what are quite substantial items in Amendments 2 and 3. In the letter that's proposed to go to the submitters, is that going to, like on page 55 and 56, it clearly outlines the minister's reasons for not supporting the items. Is it going to be that articulate in terms of why the minister's not supported those items to progress?
Through you, Mr Chair, I can't see any reason why our detail couldn't articulate the minister's reasons.
Yeah, and
Can I
through
just
you-
ask,
oh, sorry.
what do you think the timing would be on this correspondence going out?
Through you, Mr Chair. We obviously, once we've got the decision of council, we can put it together pretty quickly. Most of the submitters we contact via email. So most of the submissions were electronic.
Yeah.
I think we had almost 200 that were hard copy. So we'd write back in hard copy to them. What we could do, you've probably seen in the agenda item, there are the breakdown of items. So we can put that as an attachment to the letter.
Yeah.
So that's pretty, that explains all the items. And then there's also the minister's decision, which is on the website. So what we would like to do, as was mentioned, is try to encourage people to keep a track of all this work via the website that we've got established.
Just wondering whether we could, depending on the timing, as I said, whether you could pull together the draft sometime between now and full council, or
Yep.
and then maybe if you circulate that, we can provide some comments or guidance, or if there's a requirement for an amended resolution come full council, we can push in that direction.
Okay, just had a few more, Chair, if I may. Just quickly on that point, it's got the number of submissions. Just how many unique submitters were there? Is that number on
So
hand?
that's I think that's the 2,000.
So they were unique submitters? I just thought there might have been double up between the
Oh,
rounds.
sorry, you mean between rounds?
Yes. So there's 2,000 submissions received. Is that 1,000 submitters, or is that? If it's not on hand, that's very minor.
Through you, Mr Chair, each submission would be taken to be one submission from a person or a business, or however the circumstances may be, across the 4 rounds of the consultation, and that's shown in the figure there. You can see how many submissions were received across the rounds. And then as a consequence of analysing the submissions, there's 24,000 individual points of submission. depending on the detail in each submission, you might have up to 5 to 10 points of submission per person, and they all have to be sort of characterised, themed and responded to in a comprehensive way. So I guess in short, it'd be 2,130 people.
So I guess Councillor Barton-Lumsden's question is if someone put in round 1 and 2 and 3 and 4, it might be the one person, Joe Bloggs, but we're counting Joe Bloggs 4 times.
Through the chair, that's correct. It's the total number of submissions, and a submitter can put in multiple submissions on different issues. So it's not necessarily 2,000 people, there's 2,000 submitters.
So I guess, would we send, say Joe Bloggs had done that 4 times, would we now be sending Joe Bloggs 4 letters?
Through the chair, no, there's a way through the system that we can actually automate that to reduce duplicate submitters.
So perhaps another question, if you could, just circulate what that net amount is, just to sieve that a little bit.
Just had
Councillor Barton-Lumsden.
a few more questions. Just wanted to make sure it's completely across it, Chair. So of the 13 items that are not supported, item 15 only has 1 point that was of concern, and that was the impact trigger. So the bit that makes people have more opportunity to make submissions, that was the minister's only concern with that item. Is that correct?
Through you, Mr. Chair, I think so. We'll discuss that further in the next item. But it was the linkage back to those. His constant sort of remark was around housing supply and diversity. So there was a concern that the impact trigger was going to have an adverse effect on housing supply and diversity, which was the comment that was made, basically. Yeah.
And then I guess just to link back to item 9 and the built form improvements. Obviously, there's a need for housing, but we also want quality housing, and I know the officers did very substantial scenario testing to show that developments were still feasible. And was that a reasonable point of discussion when we were with the state, or were they of little interest to the scenario testing that we'd undertaken?
Through the chair, all of that information has been provided to the state, either through the submission of the amendment or the response to the questions. We've also reiterated that information at our workshops to say that council has done a significant amount of work to date to understand if there are implications of these policy changes to city plan. And our position is that we don't believe that they do affect development feasibility based on the information that we've previously prepared.
Thanks, Chair.
Okay, thank you. Councillor McDonald, then Councillor Owen-Jones.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I'd just like to say thank you for the council officers for the amount of work that they've put in. This has been going on for a number of years now. Yep. And what I understand is that the state government have had officers with council every step of the way while these have been in discussions. And I think with the number of submissions that we've had, it shows you the community interest. In fact, as long as I can remember, I think this is probably the most submissions that we've ever had for a town plan or changes to a town plan. And it's just so disappointing that we've got to this step and all of a sudden the state government have put in roadblocks to say, no, we're not proceeding with this. And if possible, with the letter that's sent out, I'd like the community to know what the timeframes are, because the timeframes that are going to be put in place for any of these to come into action, it'll be another, couple of years before they can actually be activated. And I think that's of major concerns with the amount of applications that we can see coming into the city now. These changes need to be in place as soon as possible. But I think the community should really know what the process is, what the time frame is, because this is just a delay in what's happening. And I think the state government should be really made accountable for what they're doing to this city.
Yep.
Thank you, Mr. Chair.
We're miles worse off.
Yeah.
Councillor Owen-Jones.
Thank you. Just in regards to Councillor Vorster's idea of having additional information on the website, are you imagining that that would happen as part of this recommendation or as part of the next recommendation, as in adding those words so that it actually happens?
Oh, look, I mean, in the first cut, the correspondence that is the next touch point directly to the submitters, I think, is what Councillor Vorster was talking about. But we can update the landing page once we have further resolutions that explain what the timing and compilation is of the future amendment packages. So I think it'll be continuing.
Okay, thank you. And in regards to the proposed draft correspondence, is that, do officers imagine that's going to be like a 2-page something? Because part of the challenge that I think we have with this is communicating in a simple form what's a horribly complex issue. So are you imagining it being 2 pages, 4 pages?
Through the chair, only a couple of pages. We've got one of the pages really is sitting in here, how we'd explain it, and then just some supporting information on the front, just to give an update on where we've got to, the next steps that will, depending on the outcome of the next agenda item, the way forward with that as well.
So I'd be interested in what Corporate Com's view is on that as well. And in particular, I think we've all moved to this quarterly newsletter release as well, which has information from the divisional councillors and information from the mayor in that newsletter. It may very well be, given the importance of this as a city-wide issue, that maybe the next quarterly round of newsletters has a common theme in regards to the mayor's message about where we stand with the city plan and why we stand in that particular way. So rather than it being something else, I think this could be a priority for that common message across all of the newsletters.
Councillor Hamill, did you have something? All right, so councillors, just in relation to that paragraph 7, I mean, this item predominantly is dealing with what we did get through and when it starts. So next item round, we're going to talk a little bit more about the way forward on the balance of the items. So I think if we can get a draft prior to full council, that'll help us on that issue. And essentially the critical part of this is that we're setting a commencement date of the 4th of July. So. Right, someone like to move that? Okay, Councillor Gates, seconded. Councillor Pauline Young. Councillor Gates, did you want to speak to it?
Chairman, only to say that, as has already been said, we did 4 rounds of consultation about this package. It's good to see some of the package being adopted finally today, but in terms of what is still to come, it is extremely disappointing because our aspiration was to listen to the community. We tried to listen to the people and reflect what they wanted to see in this amendment package in terms of setbacks, the green space around buildings and height, and to have it rejected at this stage by the Minister is not doing anything to assist with the housing supply that we know is so desperately needed. Today we get a chance to work out the future with that, but I'd have to say I'm pleased to be adopting some of it at long last because there's been so many delays along the way, and it'll be good to get moving, especially from my part with the additional housing at Upper Coomera that comes in because of an area's inclusion in the urban footprint. So that's one positive for housing supply that we'll now see proceed.
Right, anyone else want to speak for or against? Councillor Vorster.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman. The unfortunate reality is that we only exist as a level of government through the state's Local Government Act. We're a creature of the state government, and that can be quite jarring for Gold Coasters who expect those who are closest to the people to be their most effective representatives. I think we've been put in an impossible situation by the state government, being asked to go to the community time and time and time again to consult with them on the future of the city, the way it looks, the way it functions, but then effectively being told to disregard that community feedback. I actually believe it makes a mockery of community-led decision-making, and the minister's intervention will fundamentally undermine any future consultation that we undertake on their behalf with the community and the way the city looks. What confidence will a future submitter have when we engage with them that when they speak up, that we will listen and that we will achieve outcomes? What confidence will they have? I would put to you that they should have zero confidence that they will achieve anything with a submission, because when we do it 4 and 5 times, it effectively amounts to nothing. And that's not because of us as a council, and it's not because of our hard-working and I'm sure overworked city officers. It's because the state government hasn't seen fit to take the community on the journey, and for whatever reason decided to implement their own will through us as a council. The practical reality is we have no choice other than to adopt what we can today, and I want to thank Councillor Gates for taking on that responsibility, but I cannot support the motion today. Not because I don't agree with what we can achieve, but because it actually sends a signal that community consultation can mean nothing. And that's not in keeping with the local government principles. And I think it will break faith with the community. And when we consider the next item, which is to deal with our strategy for outstanding major update 2 and 3 items, if I was a submitter, I'd be totally dissuaded from participating in the process. And I think that leads to an overall worse outcome for the city. So I just want to put that on the record, and to say this lastly. Anyone struggling to put a roof over their head or to protect their lifestyle are now miles worse off. Thank you.
Councillor Patterson.
Thank you, Chair. I share the views of my fellow councillors. This is deeply disappointing. From prior to coming into council and through my time during the amendments, I've met with hundreds of residents who were very, very concerned about this, but were very grateful that they had an opportunity to have their say. I want to make it clear to those residents today that what this means is the state government are saying, yes, we want your height and we want your increase in making it easier for developers. No, we don't want your deeper landscaping. No, we don't want better site setbacks. And no, we don't want assurances on height. That is what the state government is telling us after all of our community engagement and work. This morning, ABC Radio did a conversation about city planning and what council needs to do. It would have been great if ABC took the opportunity to invite one of our council officers or councillor, the chair of planning, to engage in that conversation. And they may have learnt the issue is not at council level. The issue is at state level. Our officers have done rigorous scenario testing, and as has been stated again and again, the state government have been going along this journey with us the whole way, pointing out that yes, it's great that we have community feedback, and then at the last minute saying we do not care an iota about what the Gold Coast community thinks. We just want to make it as easy as possible for property developers. This really is quite despicable. and I would not be supporting it for the same reasons as Councillor Vorster. Yes, we need to take some, but I don't want to give an inch to let the state government think that I would accept that they would do this to our community.
Thanks, Councillor Patterson. Anyone else want to speak for or against? Councillor O'Neill.
Thanks, Chair. Look, I feel exactly the same way as my councillor colleagues as well. And we did have a group in my area, Save Currumbin, that took the time to actually do submissions, which cost them a lot of money, and now they're tied up in the amendments that the state won't approve. So they're disappointed as well. They do realise that it's the state holding it up. So I think that if we get those facts out there to make everybody aware that we want all of the amendments 2 and 3 to be adopted, I think that that's what we need to do, and as quickly as possible. So I will be voting for this motion today because I don't want to hold up these other amendments. I think that we need to do it. We are benevolent to the state, and we're under a State Planning Act, so I think we have to actually approve this today to get it ball rolling, but we really have to move on working with the state to get our other amendments through as soon as possible. Thank you.
Councillor Barton-Lumsden.
Thanks, Chair. Just the same again to mirror all the councillors. I think it's important, especially if we are writing to submitters, that it is very clear as to the state's reasoning as to why they're not supportive and why we're being railroaded down this path. And I think timing-wise is important so that councillors can be assistive in that communication piece as well. It's just so disappointing that so much consultation has been done. As Councillor O'Neill just said, there's been groups that had concerns from the get-go. They've been involved, taken on the journey through every step of consultation, and each round of consultation saw a positive change to a more balanced approach to city and sustainable approach to city development that a lot of people were eager to now see. And essentially all the stuff that was shifting in that positive direction has just been ripped away, and we're left with the just the one side of the balance beam. It's very disappointing, but hopefully with the next item we can come up with a strategy to move forward.
Thank you. Councillor Taylor.
Thank you, and I think I'm just going to reinforce the disappointment from most councillors. And again, I'm working with a lot of the community through the heart of the city, and all I can say is we are approving developments. The amounts that have been approved is enormous. It's as high as it's ever been. And these improvements we're doing here is to just get the balance right between a built form in a city and a right outcome for our community. And that's the reason we go and talk to the community, is we know we're growing as a city and we're going to continue growing and we're going to provide supply. But we need to ensure we are listening to the community, and we need to ensure that we're providing the right environment for our residents, future residents and guests when they come here. And it is a kick in the face for everyone in this room that's worked very hard. I've been here 3 years and it was on the table when I first got here, through to dealing with all our community through the last 3 years of working hard to give submissions and working hard and closely with council to be slapped in the face. And it's really time for me. I do see that we do need to move forward and accept changes, but at the same time, we do need to send a message to the state government that, yes, we're here and we're doing a job and we're doing it right and we're doing it correctly and we're listening, and at the same time, we're ensuring that we provide supply to our city. So I'm not on this committee, but for me, we need to make a stance against state government because we need action.
Thanks, Councillor Taylor. Anyone else want to speak for or against? All right, thanks, councillors. I'll speak briefly on it as well. And that's just to reflect on the fact that we embarked on this journey in November 2016. And at that point in time, I would say that it was actually showing a great deal of foresight and care for the way in which we want our city to grow, that we embarked on this journey. And we have had multiple opportunities for the State Planning Minister to endorse the state interest and for us to move forward. And then at the 11th hour, with a change in minister, we've had a change in view, which to me is completely inexplicable. Planning is a locally determined matter. We should be given the opportunity to set our planning scheme and to make planning decisions. And the state's role should be limited to genuine matters of state interest, and this intervention to me is a concerning overreach by the minister when the city plan amendments actually deliver an uplift in housing supply opportunities through the city in well-located suburbs, that there could be any criticism of us in having set about trying to achieve that as an outcome. So it makes absolutely no sense to me that there should be any criticism and that we would be blocked at the 11th hour. It is, and I back up all of what my colleagues have said in relation to the genuine engagement that we undertook with our community, because for the first time we went out, we listened and we made changes. This was a genuine consultative process, and the state government should be listening to the Gold Coast residents in the way that we listen to the Gold Coast residents. And this amendment package had something in it for everyone, from Coomera to Currumbin. Everyone was touched in some way by these amendment package changes. In Main Beach, Mermaid Beach, Palm Beach, Chevron Island, everywhere across the coast, the innovative introduction of a new low-medium zone has been delayed without any consideration for the impact of that on our community. So I, like Councillor O'Neill, will support this motion only because it clears the way for us to get on with pursuing the balance of these amendments and reforms that are so important, and makes our officers' life easier in clearing the decks of some of the work. But I don't envisage at this time that we would be stepping back from any of the important reforms that we wanted to achieve, and we will try and get as many of those done in the near future as possible to give effect to what the Gold Coast residents wanted. Anyone else want to speak? Councillor McDonald.
Thanks, Mr Chair. Could I just add that what this is doing, instead of making, certainly we've got the housing supply, but certainly with the variety and affordability, that's not happening. I've just received something in Palm Beach, for instance, and this is an application that hasn't even been approved by council yet. And the starting price for these units are $6,350,000. Oh. And I understand they've been knocked back on one of the units for $20 million. So is this affordability? No. I'm getting from my community that they're finding it very difficult to get workers because people cannot afford to live here. So what the state is doing in not approving this, the livability and affordability of this city is going out the window. People are moving out because they can't afford to live here. Businesses are suffering now because they can't get certain workers to help out. And I think that we have to really move forward, and the state government have to be made accountable for what they've done. And I feel very strongly about this.
Councillor Young.
Thanks, Chairman. I'll be brief. Yes, I'll just articulate a position that I hold, which is that this is a very disappointing outcome. There has been a very considerable amount of work has been expressed in trying to achieve the right balance and include the submissions or the ideas that were submitted to us by the community, especially about the quality of the built form that we provide, the quality of the urban environment, which will guide and influence our social, our development as a society and a community in the future, and nothing can be more important than that. Whatever the influence was on the minister for him to take the direction he did, we are unaware. It would be very interesting to see some of that correspondence from those particular individuals, and I believe that we have the right to see that, and so does the public. And ultimately, now this is resting in the hands of those people who sought to influence the minister and the minister in ensuring that the product that is delivered is of very high quality and provides not only affordability but genuine livability. I want to also mention that I was very impressed with the quality of our staff, in particular the former director Alicia Swain and current director, and those people involved in the grinding discussions with the staff from the state government department, where they really had not much to work with, but with good faith and a very positive attitude, just drove into those discussions time and time again, trying to represent the interests of the city, and I'm very grateful for that. So we're in a bit of a compromise situation here, and one of the outcomes that I feel is going to influence the area that I represent, like Pacific Pines and Nerang, is a stronger interest in those areas, in developing those areas, because it's going to be cheaper and more achievable, and then that results in all sorts of, there are ramifications from that where we don't have the objectives that we sought in the targeted growth areas being able to be achieved. Thanks, Jim.
Thank you. Councillor Pauline Young.
Thanks, Chair. And look, totally agree with the discussion here with the with my colleagues. But I just think, back to Councillor McDonald's statement, we can't consider anything in isolation, and to say it's a $6 million unit, we don't want to discriminate against people who are coming into our city that are actually looking to not only invest in working in the city, but also to live in the city. So I think the biggest thing for the council is we're trying to achieve a balance across the board, from affordable housing to housing for people who are choosing to live into our city, and to bring further business and diversify our economy with different offerings within the city, whether it comes into our health and knowledge precinct, or whether it comes into our education, whether it comes into our film industry or anything. We still have to strike that balance that we have an offering for anybody who chooses to live in our city, and to use a particular application in isolation isn't going to give us that balanced view across the city.
Thank you. Any other speakers? Councillor Gates, did you want to close?
No, thanks, Chair. I think everyone's
Take that as closed.
had their say.
Right, we'll take the vote. All in favour?
Division.
Division's called. Councillor Hamill, Councillor Gates, Councillor O'Neill, Councillor Petty Young, Councillor Pauline Young, Councillor Caldwell. Against, Councillor Owen Jones, Councillor Vorster. Carried. Item 6.2. All right, so councillors will move to 6.2, which is the balance of issues. Page 52 of the agenda, Catherine.
All right, through the Chair, the presentation of this item is in consideration of a way forward for the items that remain outstanding, or otherwise known as Part B. Of those items, there are 13 items that remain for future consideration of Council. Gavin's already provided an overview of some of those items, so I won't sort of delay the presentation in terms of the decision we would like from Council today. Just a reminder probably is that the complex nature of Major Update 2 and 3, it's an item that's considered to be significant and complex, and it's something that our state colleagues have continued to remind us about the complexity of the drafting and the understanding of the amendment package.
They still could have just said yes. Councillors, that image is on page 56 if you're finding it a bit hard to read on the screen.
So this image actually provides a breakdown of how items are related to item 9 and 11. The minister's decision in relation to the outstanding 13 items was primarily driven by item 9 and 11 and their inability to determine how interlinked they were to the overall amendment, which is then the decision was to just not allow council to adopt those items. There are some links that need to be reviewed, but we believe there are items that will be able to be progressed. In terms of what we would like to talk to you about is, since the minister's decision in October, city and state officers have met at 3 workshops to discuss a way forward. Some of those recommendations that have come from the workshop are things like, these are all new amendment packages. There will be no recommencement of these amendments, which means that we have to start state interest review. We have to proceed back through community consultation and then back to the minister for adoption. Something that the city's already recognised as a need is the need to break down these amendments into smaller items. So that's something we're already been working on. What they've also asked for is a development of a clear problem definition. So what was the original intent from council in undertaking these amendments? We've already started those conversations with the state officers to provide them guidance in terms of the background of the items. We've taken them out on site to say, well, these are the actual issues that we're facing as a city, to build their overall understanding of why the amendments were made. And also the need for evidence-based planning. It's something that was written in the decision notice, was the need for things like feasibility assessments. What we're continuing to do is work through with state officers about what justification is actually needed to support a future amendment. But what we are proposing is to actually conduct a workshop with the councillors and the mayor to provide an outline of a way forward with these remaining items, which we'll look at in terms of, there are items, as I mentioned, that we believe we can proceed with quite quickly. So we'll look to provide information on and outline what those items are and provide you with sort of an outline of timing. There's other items that relate to item 9, including setback, site cover and landscaping, that we will require further work to do, but we're also proposing to come forward to you with a solution at that workshop as well, in terms of, this is the work we think we can do in the timing between now and the next council election, because we're mindful that we're about to move into a year where we've got council and state election periods, and what that could have on as an implication to our city plan amendment program. Just in terms of the program, if you turn to page 65, we've provided just a bit of an outline of where we see we'll be heading in the next 3 to 4 months. So what we would like to do is hold the workshop in early to mid-March. From then, we will then report back to council about, provide a formal update, sorry. Okay, we'll provide a formal update to council in terms of a way forward. We'll also, at that workshop, talked about the need for potentially tailored amendment processes that the city can use to get this amendments that the state has previously seen and endorsed in principle through a quicker process, but we'll also talk to you about the process and some of the drawbacks from that as well. So we'll discuss that at that workshop. From there, we'll then start to develop the actual amendment packages that we think we can break these items out to, and then a timing of when they will come to council for consideration.
Okay, Councillor Owen-Jones, then Councillor McDonald, Councillor Barton-Lumsden, Councillor Taylor.
Chair, I think you summed it up quite well when you interrupted the conversation to say that they could have just signed it off. And I'm really interested in regards to the workshop. Despite the officers doing an enormous amount of work with their colleagues in the state, a workshop is to brief the councillors and the mayor. Is there any possibility of the 2 members of government involved, being Mr Miles and the sole member on the Gold Coast, being also invited to that workshop?
Well, I mean, the question was to you, Catherine, so, I mean, we can invite whoever we want, whether
the
they
challenge
decide
is,
to turn up or
my
not.
dealings with the state officers is that they're not allowed to talk to politicians, basically, and, but we've got a political problem where we've got a council that's agreed in regards to amendments packages 2 and 3, and we've got a state government who's disagreed. And to me, and then it gets communicated via the officers, you know, and I have a sense that maybe the officers don't necessarily always agree with those political decisions. I just think it would be a really good start to a workshop in regards to truncating the waste of time if we could actually get the minister to come down and have that conversation with us.
Yeah, well, let's just add that as a 2, that the Minister for Planning.
And he may choose to not accept an invitation, but like, I mean, we've just reached the point where since 2016 we've been spinning our wheels, and quite frankly I voted against the last one because I think we're actually reached the point where we may be better off if the minister can't assist us do package 2 and 3, get actually started on the entire amendment of the planning scheme, which we know is coming anyway, you know? And so there comes a time after a 3 or 4 year period where we need to do that. And I acknowledge what the officers said in regards to the next state election, but that's October 2024. Like, I mean, so they may enjoy that type of procrastination, but I don't think our residents do. And that might be a statement rather than a question.
That's right. I'm happy for us to consider a recommendation where we invite the planning minister, the member for Gaven, and their supporting council, their supporting
actors,
departmental officers.
No, look, I mean, we've reached the point where in the chamber or wherever we have a workshop, because and it might be just for 15 minutes where he says we'll do these things and we're on our way, you know, but he may actually hear the frustration of the elected representatives firsthand rather than it being that 2-part shuffle that happens between the poor city officers having to deal with their counterparts in state.
Yeah. Okay, thank you. Councillor McDonald.
Thanks, Mr Chair. Again, I think the community should be advised, because with this, even though it's been going since 2016, we've had all these consultation with our community. Whatever happens now with amendments 9 and 11, that's going to have to go out for community consultation all over again. Exactly the same thing that's going out. They're going to have to put in all those submissions again. I mean, you know, it's just ridiculous what the community is going to have to go through. And I just think there should be really questions asked in the state parliament. Why has this happened? Why has this happened to the Gold Coast community? We should be getting some of these answers, because it's really not acceptable that, again, the community has to go out. What is the time frame on this? What are we looking at? Another 5 years, you know, before all this comes into play, even if the state government signs off on it? You know, have we got a time frame on this? Because as we know, when it comes into play, you know, there's still a period of, 12 months, 18 months before it actually is acted upon. So we're probably looking at another 5 years, even if the state put this through in the next 12 months. We're looking at probably another 5 years before it all comes into play. Is that correct?
Through the chair, we will at the workshop start to outline some timeframes. It shouldn't take 5 years to get through, but the comment I made in relation to the state government election is that there's a decision that's required from the minister to allow us to adopt an amendment once it's gone through the consultation process and been reconsidered by council. The implications of that is that they will go into a caretaker period, which essentially halts the amendment at a process if they're in the decision period. So that's the sort of implication in terms of the election period, that we really do have quite a condensed timeframe to get this work through and back to the state so we can proceed along the course.
Can I just ask just a technical question? Could an incoming alternative government pick up the Amendment 2 and 3 package, the balance of those items, and provide state approval?
That would possibly be a legal question, but my understanding would be that the minister's decision has been made and that any new items are new amendments. So they would be the requirement to decide that under a new minister or government.
So the state minister, in having made that decision, has effectively hamstrung any incoming alternative government from taking an immediately different view and acting on the community's interests straight away. Okay, thanks. Sorry, Councillor McDonald.
Yeah, just another question. Didn't we have this at the last election where the minister had to make a decision and there was an extension of time that was requested?
Well, I mean, if you look at the timeline that we were just referring to earlier, which was on page 70-something of the 68, there's a whole range of points in time where the state touched this, and there was obviously a significant delay between the December 2021 submission to the minister and when the decision was made in October 2022. That was 10 months. There was no election during that time. There's just a delay.
So I'm not very far out in saying, you know, it could be another 5 years.
All right, Councillor Bowden-Lumsden, and then Councillor Taylor, and then Councillor Hamill.
Thanks, Chair. I guess Councillor Owen-Jones said having the minister would be very helpful because there's been so much backwards and forwards. If there can just be the discussion between the elected representatives as to the pain that's being felt, I think that would be very helpful. But just wanting to know how far away. So looks like there's 13 items that weren't supported, but 10 of them, from reading this, they're okay except for the intertwining with item 9 and 11. So if item 9 was different, item 11 was different, item 15 didn't have the impact trigger, is it all good to go then, essentially? There's no changes needed to 1 to 9 and 15 to 30? Or is that simplifying it too much?
Through the Chair, those are the items that we believe we can put through apart from targeted growth, which is reliant on the new low medium density zone. We need to have that included as amendment package to be able to then pull through the targeted growth zoning height and density changes.
So the low medium density needs to be a separate amendment package?
That's what we're going to work through, because even though we are trying to break out the packages, there are some still natural relationships that we can work on to get this work through. The decision we can then make is how this is packaged up and how we consult with the community to make sure that an industry in terms of building their understanding of what the city is trying to propose to do.
I guess, sorry, Chair, even on that, we had already done engagement with industry as well. There'd been a lot of engagement, not just with residents and people who live on the Gold Coast, but also the industry who are looking to build these housing options on the Gold Coast. And that's why I'm just so confused as to what the minister's seeing wrong with built form improvements and the light rail corridor. But, yeah, thank you.
All right, Councillor Taylor, then Councillor Hamill.
Thank you. And I just want to understand, we come back to the whole process is going to have community consultation. What I'm hearing is we've done community consultation, local councils have done community consultation, officers have worked with state officers, and the minister's not happy with the state of it at the moment. A workshop would be great to have the minister, but maybe he should come down here and do the community consultation, because why are we bothering doing it if they're not going to listen at the highest level? I mean, this whole process has, from 2016 to now, has been about getting a balance and doing the community consultation, which we've been doing the community consultation. What I'm hearing here is officers have been working with state officers that have been pretty much on the same page over the period of time. Councillors have worked closely with community consultation. to do the work to build a city plan that's right for the city moving forward, and there's one person that's got to his office that doesn't like it. And he's asking us now to start the process and do the community consultation. So with the conversation with the officers, where does he get involved in it so that he can get a right outcome that we have done here?
So we'll talk through the way the timelines will follow when we have our workshop. But we are hoping the essence of what's been described as a tailored amendment process essentially means that you can truncate the timelines by running public consultation in parallel to the state interest check, which saves you some double handling of time. But yeah, your point's well made. Councillor Hamill.
Through you, Chair, just to pick up on Councillor Owen Jones's point, but can I get confirmation that the workshop, that one of the items to be discussed or options to be discussed is if we just go straight to commencing a new city plan process? Like in terms of a workshop and looking at all options, I'm just hoping that is going to be an option that's on the table to be considered and talked about.
Through the Chair, that is correct. We do have a need to review our planning scheme. They have a 10-year statutory lifespan. We're now within a 3-year period of having to do that work. So that will be one of the options that we consider moving forward as well.
Thank you, Chair.
Councillor Vorster.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman. I'd just like to ask a question about a clarification paper that was publicly provided through our website and obviously to the state government as well concerning the definitions or the terminology used for the fourth stage of the light rail. And I just wondered, for the benefit of the committee and those listening, if we could just put on the record what we were hoping to achieve with that change in terminology and what the state government's response was.
Through the Chair, the proposed amendment sought to provide clarification that Stage 4 light rail wasn't to be used as a relevant, well, what could be concluded as a relevant matter for uplift in planning height, density and zone changes before council had gone through and done the land use planning for the corridor. It would have been a similar wording intent to what it already sits in the planning scheme for investigation areas, which says that they are to remain as is until council goes through and does their localised planning investigations.
So, Mr. Chairman, through you, so would it be fair to say that in response to community feedback, council took the step of strengthening the wording along the proposed fourth stage of the light rail to reduce speculative development outcomes?
Through the Chair, we had endeavoured to strengthen outcomes. Having said that, there are still outcomes in the current planning scheme version 9. It's just that we had tried to actually be quite clear and concise of Stage 4 corridor was not to be considered as an option for uplifting further planning provisions for that corridor.
So just to be clear, council sought to make sure that along Stage 4 of the light rail, what we call Stage 4, that the prospect of light rail couldn't be relied on to achieve particular outcomes, and it was state intervention that has removed those strengthened provisions.
Yes, it's been pulled in as part of item 9 in the review of the light rail overlay code. It's a matter that does sit within the strategic framework, but because we were unable to adopt item 11, it is a matter that it now sits as the current wording for the planning scheme.
Right, and because when the new planning scheme commences in, what's 23rd of July, I think it was?
4th of July.
4th of July. That new scheme will not include these strengthened provisions. We have to commence potentially a new process to try and recreate those provisions if we see fit. In the meantime, proponents will have an opportunity to exercise, let's call it more liberal property rights. That be fair?
Through the chair, correct. It would still trigger an impact application, but it's then what's considered to be a reasonable matter. There has been development industry interest in the fact that light rail is coming, and it should be considered as a relevant matter because there's going to be a transit corridor. But having said that, council still needs to go through and make sure the land use and infrastructure planning is done and in place to make sure that these communities can grow as they should.
Right. Now, let's imagine a future when the minister decides to listen to the community and we have the opportunity to progress further changes to the planning scheme. When that future planning scheme commences, would it be fair to say that a proponent would have superseded or have the ability to apply under the superseded planning scheme to take advantage of the earlier, more liberal treatment?
Yes, through the superseded application rights, that is a determination of council.
And they have 12 months
Correct.
to make an application to lodge a DA under the superseded scheme. And in the normal course of granting a development approval under that superseded approval, how long usually does a developer have to exercise those rights before a DA lapses?
That's through the chair. That's possibly more a question for Mick. 6 years, and council can extend the currency period for those approvals as well.
Okay, so today, if the minister actually heeded community feedback and adopted our changes, there would be effectively a 7-year window where a land use or a development could commence or be finalised, what have you, under the existing softer provisions. And so we've got 7 years. So any gap between now and a future planning scheme we add on top of those 7 years. So it could be 8, 9 and 10 years of speculative development outcomes in the corridor because of the delays that we had. And Mr Chairman, just to close that out, when and you might be able to answer.
Mick, are you listening to this? Okay. I'll get you to make a contribution in a second.
When did the minister first have an opportunity to sign off on this amendment package, which included these strengthened provisions? I'm just trying to understand, when could he have signed off on this and started the clock running on the 7 years?
I might actually get Grant to respond to that question if possible.
Well, I mean, the state interest was submitted in December 2021. So it's reasonable to suggest that the minister could have acted promptly rather than waiting the 10 months. There would have always been a delay between state interest being granted and us adopting the commencement. So you can extrapolate that it might have been at least, well, I mean, at the moment we don't know what the date is. So it could have been early 2022 versus now the never never.
Right.
And through the chair, we also made refinements in going to round 2 based on community feedback to strengthen that, to say council recognise there's a need to do this planning for the corridor. Until that happens, we would like to maintain the current planning provisions.
Awesome. Thanks, Mr Chairman.
Yeah, that's right. So Mick, can you just explain in real terms what would happen in that situation and what the extent of that impact is in a DA?
Through you, Mr Chair, just to clarify, through delays to amendments or the just...
No, the bit about the strengthened provisions in the strategic framework, which essentially say that we want to do the planning first for the corridor before you start relying on just a line on a map as being a reason for support for extra whatever.
Yeah, I guess through you, Mr Chair, so if we receive DAs in the areas where the new rail is going, there'll be code accessible DAs still, and that's sort of very black and white. Anything above, anything above the code assessable thresholds obviously goes into that impact assessment, which is where the other relevant matters come in. So if there is some direction in the strategic framework, that would certainly assist officers to, there'd be more regard given to what's in the scheme rather than what potentially might come and what sort of assumptions some people might make in relation to whatever uplift the light rail might give. So certainly be helpful in that sense.
All right, thanks. All right, any other questions? All right, so do we need to add to that second paragraph, for example, that it be those ministers and departmental staff, or does that help? Do we need to say that? Yeah, Councillor Young.
I actually think we actually need to talk about departmental staff because it's like it comes to this room and we all vote on it. It's like saying, well, we'll just get, and it's just saying we'll get the mayor to come up and he can say what's going ahead when he hasn't spoken to us. We would like to think that the officers would be, well, I would like to be thinking, because I'm sure something goes on Stephen Miles' desk, he just doesn't go, I'll stamp that, because he's had a lot of input from people. And that's not defending anyone, any government at all, but it's just saying they don't just single-mindedly look at a piece of paper and say there's 6 years' worth of work, bang's gone. I'm sure there's different departments that he's dealt with all the way along that have perhaps expressed concerns. So I think him coming alone isn't really going to achieve it a lot. But if there's people that...
What do we think, team? Do we want some...
It's just my thoughts.
Staff, or just leave it, or...
I think cast the net wide.
Yeah, comes. Yeah.
Get net benefit.
Yeah, so I think just add, after youth affairs, just add, and relevant... Okay. All right. Anything else we need to add to that, Councillor Owen-Jones?
Not to add, but so to me, it's actually in order for us to try to actually get a good outcome and get it quicker than what we would otherwise. So I don't propose it as some type of, us, them type of thing. It's actually, they're our elephant and we're just the mouse in the whole story. So if they want to come down and tell us how it's going to be, that would actually be really helpful rather than us lose another 12 or so months because we didn't quite get it. So, and in terms of participation, I suppose in my mind they can stay as long as they want, but if it's just introductory remarks and this is what I need you to do, that's at least the start, So, but to me it's not, I haven't proposed it as some type of cunning political foil. It's really just to say, can you actually come down and have a genuine conversation as to how we can progress this thing forward?
Okay. Councillor Owen-Jones, you want to move that? Moved by Councillor Owen-Jones, seconded by Councillor Peter Young. Anyone else want to speak for or against? Otherwise, we'll take the vote. All in favour? Against? Carried. All right, thank you, councillors. Item 6.1. Okay.
Oh.
When you're ready.
Good morning, everyone. Through you, Mr. Chair, I'd just like to present the minor and admin 9 for the changes to the city plan. So this is just a small 16-part items, all mapping for this change. This report just seeks endorsement to adopt and commence this package for the next version of the city plan, which would commence with major update 2 and 3.
So can I just ask a question on that?
Sure.
In the resolution, I think it says the 30th of It says a different date. It doesn't say the 4th of July.
Oh,
Am I
okay.
reading that correctly, or am I
It might have changed after I've
mistaken?
through. It should go with the 4th of July amendment.
So just the recommendation on page 23 says commence on 30 June. So we're thinking that was intended to say 4th of July?
4th of July, yeah.
Okay, sorry, keep going.
Through the chair, this mapping package includes generic updates to the city plan, which includes zoning and overlay mapping to reflect development approvals that have enacted across the city, and an update to the building height overlay map to reinstate the Spit master plan height sensitive area across the entire part of the Spit. And the last item is to reflect state policy mapping for the mining and extractive resources. And we have directly implemented that mapping straight into our extractive resources overlay map. I'll just go briefly through each item, unless there's something we can just jump straight to an item or go through them all. Go on, Kamal.
So Councillor Gates has just pointed out page 50 to me, which is the city plan mapping for extractive industry at Oxenford. What exactly is that change? Because the original instructions that the city received in 2015 from the then Deputy Premier Sini were that the KRAs needed to be reflected. What are we proposing to change here?
Through the chair, we're just proposing to reflect the mapping that the state has updated in 2021, sorry. And at the moment, we are just going to use that data that they've used. Without that data, we are just inconsistent with the state mapping. To implement this is just to correctly integrate the state interests.
So I don't understand, because I thought that we did that in 2016, which is why we ended up in part with a kerfuffle.
So through the chair, we did do that correctly in 2016. The state has since gone through and updated their own state planning policy mapping. We're proposing to undertake an amendment to city plan to now reflect their amended KRA mapping, which is what this minor amendment picks up.
And do we
Could we just circulate a before and after that shows what, with a highlighted change or something?
Do we have the ability to do anything other than this?
We do through through the chair, through other overlays like the environmental overlay. The way we portray it is our portrayal. This is a direct implementation of the state's own mapping. Because it is a KRA, we haven't chosen to go and do our own work to further define these boundaries.
So, Mr Chair, the challenge we had with the Oxenford Quarry was both in the KRA being mapped in accordance with the state's KRA.
Hang on.
Yes, me too.
I'll have to leave the room if there's discussion about the...
Well, well, there's two things. Firstly, we're definitely talking about the Oxenford Quarry. The second thing is that this is an ordinary business item. So if you want to make your declarations and place them on the record, then Councillor Patterson, you're fine, thanks. You can either make the declaration.
Clarified as an ordinary business item earlier, hasn't it? So I'm happy to say what my conflict is, and it's simply with the consultant Arcadis, I think, who was employed by the Oxenford Quarry, or was it Planet, I think. I mean, it's hard to remember. But if it's an ordinary business item, as confirmed earlier, then I'm able to remain in the room, aren't I?
Yes.
And I'll also draw your attention to the fact that my property is identified in the map on page 50 that's now being discussed, and although it's not impacted by the shading, I think I should draw that to your attention. I don't know if you want a...
Thank you. Sorry, Councillor Jones.
...declaration, but I don't think it's necessary.
So the challenge in part we have is that a previous State Minister gave a direction to the city to remove a buffer, which we did. And that was the control that the city had in regards to allowing for mining activity to happen closer than it had ever happened in regards to residential properties. And we had no choice about that because it was a ministerial directive in regards to the 2016 city plan. My question is in regards to today, do we have a choice in regards to these proposed amendments? Because if we have a choice, I would like nothing more than for us to consider changing the amendment to actually reflect a 500 metre buffer rather than to reflect a state key resource area.
Through the chair, council always has a choice. It just changes the process because we've reflected state mapping. We're allowed to go through a minor amendment process, which means we don't have to go to public consultation. We're reflecting information that the state themselves has confirmed and uses for development assessment. If we choose to, or if council chooses to change any of the KRAs, we will have to go through the major amendment process.
So I know what's in the best interest of the residents, and the residents is to actually have a buffer that's sensible and was sensible for 20 odd years, you know? So, and the fact is that the site has had a KRA that was previously protected by a buffer. The buffer was ordered to be removed, and now we're affirming a KRA, which, to be honest with you, I would need to see what the difference is between this and the 2016 maps, because I was under the impression that the 2016 maps were, the ministerial directive was that it had to reflect the then KRA. So if they have substantially changed the footprint to make it even bigger, that's a bigger problem. And our overlay, the only overlay that we had left to protect us was effectively in regards to the visual amenity, and that protected the ridge line, which pushed them back. So I can't support this today without knowing what it looked like in
Can I just show on the map? I've got just a quick photo of it. It's just the two layers overlaid on top of each other. Is that the one there? Yeah. Let's see. So it's a little bit hard to see, but the purple boundary is the one I'm proposing today, and the orange over the top of that, Baker's Ridge Drive down on the southern side, that's the parts that's being removed. So the orange is what we have currently in version 9 of the scheme.
So the separation area is so the KRA actually hasn't changed. The separation area has been reduced to reflect built development.
That's correct.
Which was part of a court order.
So I think a lot of that is low density residential along that ridge.
Okay, so
that's been removed
that to me is actually a different thing. So I can accept why we're doing it, because we're reflecting that we haven't actually moved the KRA remains as per the 2016 directions. The separation area is being reduced to reflect built form, which was a creation of a court order. Okay, thank you. But I don't have the ability to ask for the KRA to be pushed back without it triggering a major amendment, which isn't the proposal today.
Okay, thank you.
Go back to item 1.
No. So I can't, so that you can imagine increasing the separation area isn't something that we can do either. Because the current state planning policy requires a 1 kilometre buffer to a hard rock quarry.
Unless you happen to have received a nice letter from
Yeah.
someone.
So does this go through state interest check, the amendments, or is it?
Not for a minor amendment.
Thank you.
Okay, item 1 is just a new cadaster. So we've replaced our current cadaster with the, I think it's November 2022 or October 2022. And that comes with a few challenges where we've got zoning that needs to be added to new areas where it's either previously road or previously waterways, in this case in a little picture. That's quite a simple one. And we've got items 2 to 14 in this package is for the development approval completions, where we've reflected development based on completed development. In a lot of the cases, as you can see in this one, it's purely just council-owned properties where we've identified them as either open space or conservation or special purpose zone. There's another one there where we've just got open space at the top. Again, conservation across the rail line, and then open space on the eastern side. Open space over drainage. Again, open space. A little bit of conservation on the eastern side with some open space on the road. A little bit of conservation on the western side and open space over some parks and drainage areas.
Sorry, can you just go back a slide?
Sure.
What's that street? So, sorry, is the mid-green kind of colour
Open space?
open space?
Yes.
Not conservation?
There's the conservation's on the the western side. That's the darker green.
Okay, and so in that situation, would the conservation reflect some sort of conditions of approval, or how have we landed on that?
Yes. Through the chair, it's purely based on conditions of approval where, or in this case, it might be environmental factors that would contribute to conservation being the most appropriate zone.
So just flagging for Councillor Gates, for example, like we obviously then have different limitations with what we do with that space when it's conservation versus when it's open space for park.
Yep.
So we might just want to check a couple of those. That's fine, thanks. Councillor Owen Jones.
So I'm going to say this really delicately because our Chief Investment Officer, Jeff McAllister, has he been appraised of any of these minor proposed changes?
Not to my knowledge. We do go through a consultation phase with our environmental teams.
Yep, and have we discussed this with Property Services?
Once again, that would still require us to, we go through our environmental team for this, but we could do that.
So, Mr Chair, I think that Property Services, in conjunction with our Chief Investment Officer, we're doing a review of land that was owned by the city, and I think it would be useful to make sure that a body of work that they are doing at the moment isn't going to be impacted in regards to proposed zoning changes for land that may be identified as having a freehold status, so because I don't know, I think that they're close to finishing a body of work in regards to some of our surplus to requirement land, and if that's an example of change, I just want to make sure that that doesn't impact on anything that they might be cooking through, or either eliminating or adding to particular lists that they're working for. So that might be one for you, Nick, to talk directly to Jeff in regards to.
But doesn't this change reflect what's already been approved?
Through the chair, that's correct. It reflects current development approvals that have been commenced and concluded, and in that there would have been a lot layout plan of which a lot of these changes reflect. If there was conditions in those development approvals that related to rehabilitation of areas and dedication, then the officers we've then made a determination of, well, is it more appropriate for open space or conservation as an outcome of the development approval from council?
Yep, so if we look at whatever that street is with the green lump on it, immediately below Division 3, what's that street, Donna? Beecroft Street. I don't know what that actually looks like in real life, and I don't know whether or not somebody with exciting ideas about what the city land portfolio looks like has identified it as because of the zoning, regardless of any development approvals or conditions, because of the zoning, might suddenly think, oh, well, that's a site that's worth X because of the zoning, you know, so.
Better not, I'll punch it.
Well, that's the process that they're going through at the moment, and they may indeed get punched, you know, so, but I suppose the whole point of me raising it is just to make sure that maybe Nick discusses with Jeff to make sure that whatever list he's cooking up reflects the decision that we're going to make today.
Through you, Mr Chair, yeah, happy for us to have a conversation with the Chief Investment Officer to make sure that there's no conflict.
Councillor Gates.
Can I just ask, the land that we're proposing here to be conservation, what was it previously, just open space?
Medium density residential. This particular development would have been roads and park. So I'm not sure which one.
Because I'm just wondering what the impacts will be. Can you see where the houses back onto that new conservation area?
So page 31.
What's the situation with maintenance at the rear of the properties when they abut a conservation area? Yeah, I mean, it's a lived experience that it's an absolutely terrible outcome. So why do we do it?
That's been approved. This is just reflecting the approval.
So there's nothing we can do about changing the mapping?
Through the chair, so these are basically reflecting development approvals. So we know that these have either been substantially constructed now, land's been dedicated back to council, so the zonings reflect the intended use of the land. And that, you know, with those questions about those abutting those blocks, that would have had to be matters dealt with through the development application.
Okay. Thanks.
Thank you.
Yes, through the chair, I've just found the development approval for that one was from 2017, and it's for lot 900, is dedicated as conservation estate as part of the approval.
Isn't it?
Well, I mean, I think that saving the valuable vegetation and the green frame through some of these areas are critically important.
Thanks for all
Too
your help.
soon. Anyway, it's still probably, Councillor Gates, probably worthwhile just double checking some of them because, yeah.
Item 9, just another quick one, just to change open space at the rear. Item 10, there's a little bit of rural residential at the back of the large estate there, just changing it to medium density. Just next door, we've got quite a bit of mixed zoning going on, just to accommodate for the large lot precinct over the top of the low-density residential, the cul-de-sac at the top there. And again, some conservation at the rear with some open space over the drainage. This one's the Helensvale Bowls Club. They've recently acquired a lot and turned it into parking, I believe. So we're just going to reflect their approval to put sport and recreation over the top of that part. Here's a commercial development in Labrador where there's been a acquirement of a lot, and we're just reflecting the commercial services as developed and approved. That one's a little bit of a tidy up in Emerald Lakes, just to fix up a little bit of the zoning there. So that's all of our development approvals, and now we'll come to the spit. This is a little bit of a different one. We've got a mapping error that was created when we put together the the version for adoption for major update 2 and 3 for the state government. Given there were so many versions to get to this point, one of the versions accidentally knocked out part of the major 2-3 component for the spit height sensitive area. I think you can just see it there with the little red outline. We'd just like to reinstate that before it goes into the new version of the scheme. And then item 15 is our KRA changes, and a lot of them are very minor in nature. It's quite hard to see there, but there's very slight changes along the boundaries. That one's probably the most obvious one, where it's all been reduced. Similar to these ones, the buffer area has been reduced. Keep going. That one, you can see there's a slight encroachment into the properties there. So the hatching is the new buffer. That's the Oxenford one there.
On the eastern side of that dotted separation area, you can see a gap between properties that have been built on at least a decade ago. It's on the right-hand side of the image. So there's a gap between them and the boundary, which seems not to reflect the actual developments that have been approved. I don't know what's in that strip. I think it would probably... Yes, thanks.
So,
Is that Park?
no, I think it's probably owned by.
Yeah, but what's the zoning? The question's really, what's the zoning of that component?
And why isn't the separation area to butt all of the existing residential properties?
Yeah.
I'm not sure about that one.
Can we...
Which is
ask
kind
the
of the
question?
reverse of what you've done at Bakersfield, you know?
Yeah.
So,
So through you, Mr Chair, we can find out what the zoning is for that gap there and circulate that prior to full council if you like.
Can we change it?
Through the
This
chair, no, we're just reflecting the state mapping.
Yeah.
We've just taken their data and implementing it in our city
It may
plan.
be that their mapping is incorrect. We should tell them.
So through the chair, the current mapping, there's no change in that
Not
spot
on
from
that
the current
side
map.
there.
From the
No.
current
The only
mapping.
change on that map is just on the low density residential on the east, or the southwest side. Again, there's a very small change to the north there, just to get rid of the low density residential properties out of the buffer. Oh, that's
so
it.
can we just go back to the Burley slide? So are they the changes as to the residential properties, and then the properties that are all in the existing separation area, are they all industrial?
I believe so.
Is it Councillor McDonald?
Yes, up, yeah, on the left-hand side, up the top, that's industrial.
And to the right?
They're residential.
They're residential.
So the benefit of reducing the separation area to the quarry is it would actually make it easier for those property owners to do different things?
In terms of dwelling houses, or?
Yeah, so at the moment there's a overlay map which notionally might make it difficult for them to do duplexes or anything like that.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Through the chair, it's important to note too that state have just brought out a new kind of regulation. It's called the Roomy Accommodation Regulation, which kind of means dwelling houses or low density res zones are not kind of picked up through these overlays. So they kind of make them kind of what do you call it, accepted development. So they're not subject to relevant overlays, and we're seeking some legal advice now to see if the KRA buffers or the overlay is a relevant overlay. That was one of our concerns that was raised with state. So at this stage we are seeking legal advice on whether or not the KRA overlays now are a relevant overlay in terms of the regulation.
That's it for me, unless there is any other questions.
Moved by councillor Peter Young, seconded. Councillor O'Neill.
So can I just have one question?
Yeah.
How do we communicate to the owners impacted by those changes for the administrative? So the Bakers Ridge Drive, will they get a correspondence from the city to say?
Yeah, through the chair, they've already had consultation with the state government about these changes back in 2021.
So the state wrote to those individual property owners advising them that, thank you.
Just a quick look at the map suggests to me that it's open space. That zigzags in and out.
It's probably owned by their own pastoral.
Are you talking about the Oxford?
Yeah, Oxenford, yeah. Unfortunately, the technology is going super slow, so I can't get the exact details. But okay, anything else? Any other questions? Did anyone want to speak to it? All right, we'll take the vote. All in favour? Councillor Hamill, Councillor Owen-Jones, Councillor Gates, Councillor O'Neill, Councillor Peter Young, Councillor Pauline Young, Councillor Herman Forster, Councillor Caldwell. Against? Carried unanimously. All right, I think that's all of our agenda items. So councillors, I just had one item of general business which I've sent to the minutes secretary, so I'll just bring that up on the screen. So councillors, as we know, there's a shortage of about 5,000 state departmental houses that would be required to be delivered for us to be on parity with, say, Brisbane on a per capita basis for housing for those people that are most in need. Now, I have had a couple of occasions recently where the state government, to their credit, have obviously identified some sites that could be developed, and that then triggers a process of providing council with a notice of a proposed public housing development. What appears to me is that our response hasn't been consistent. So, for example, one of the sites says is in a 2-storey and 9-metre area, may be the subject of the 50% uplift, which we know only gets to 3 storeys, but the state is proposing a 4-storey development. And I think it should be very much in our available information that we see these things early and are able to make comments. And then it's very important that that our council officers in their response actually provide the appropriate answer to the state government, and that requires them to provide an answer as to whether it is substantially in conflict, or words to that effect, that it's not substantially inconsistent or is substantially inconsistent with the planning scheme. And so I've got one version of this where the response talks to that language and one where it doesn't, one where it would appear to be in line with city plan and one where it doesn't. So I would like to see us have a report brought forward which talks about how this process is done better in the future, particularly so that there is an opportunity for the local councillor to provide comments that could then be incorporated into the state response. And secondly, that the community have this information available to them, and because depending on a certain course of action, it may mean that these are publicly notified, or they may not be. So I think it's up to us to provide the level of transparency to make sure it's available to our community. So they're the two issues particularly that I wanted to cover off on in this approach. I'm happy if anyone else has had experiences like this where there's issues that we could add to that list of improvements, but those were the two things that jumped out to me as being very important. Councillor Jones and Councillor Vorster.
So I don't recall the Act of Parliament. There's an Act of Parliament that gives an exemption for public works and I've had a recent example, Councillor Caldwell, in Hope Island, where a private supplier used that exemption to enable the delivery of NDIS product, which is great because, as Councillor McDonald identified earlier, we actually need to make sure that there's something for everybody in the city. The challenge is that it completely ignored our city plan because the State Act allowed it to happen. So I don't have it on me off the top of my head, but it was a particular Public Works Act that effectively had never really been able to be used by a for-profit delivery mechanism, but the changes to the federal government funding of the NDIS scheme effectively opened the door. So in a relatively low density area with 2 stories, there's a honking big something now, and there's nothing that we can do about it because it's completely exempt. In fact, it had nothing to do with us, and I think Councillor Gates raised it at one of the state meetings, and they just shrugged and said, so be it. So that's, I think, an example of where this could be added. And likewise, the responses from councillors forming part of the submission is useful because there will be probably times where it actually makes sense that depending on the product the state is looking to develop, whether or not it is affordable housing for seniors, for example, as opposed to specific juvenile houses, that type of thing. That's the experience that I've had in Oxenford, where the state's taken private rental and achieved something that maybe the community didn't realise that they were going to do. So I think that that's the balance. We just need to be very cautious as councillors as how we respond, because if we are opposed to it, we want to make sure that we're opposed to it for all of the right reasons, because sometimes, in my view, the state has a really big, they've got a big stock of housing on the Gold Coast. I think from memory they've got about 3,500 pieces of dwellings and houses, and some of them probably could do with some renewal and some changes, but how it impacts on the streets and the residents adjacent to them, we need to be mindful
of. Councillor Vorster.
Thanks, Mr Chairman.
Sorry, Councillor Patterson, you were going to leave?
I was.
And did you want to make a quick contribution?
I did, if I may.
Sorry, Councillor Vorster.
No, I'm in your hands.
I happened to have an 11:30 meeting with Minister Leanne Enoch to open a new public housing site in Southport. So I'm going to duck off. But I would say, so this one that we're opening, pretty disappointing visual on it. And I would like to see things change and perhaps not look like that. It looks like it wouldn't take too much for them to consider making things look okay for the area as well.
Is this opening one that's being constructed?
No, it's open. It's open.
Yeah.
We're about to go open it.
Yeah. On the corner of Smith Street and...
You agree. And my only other concern is when there is large masses that the state's looking at, there's some small involvement that we have kind of at the beginning, and then it's opaque and we're off. And even the officers are really not able or allowed to inform me of what's going on. That seems a little bit odd. Anyway, I'm out.
Thank you. Thanks, Councillor Vorster. Sorry for the delay.
No, quite right. Mr Chairman, I just want to, I think, pick up on something Councillor Owen Jones said. I think we have an interest in attempting to, or rather, I think we have a role in trying to influence the state government to secure the best possible design and amenity outcome. And often it's not about opposing social housing development, but just trying to make it as livable as possible, because I think there is a race to the bottom. They are trying to deliver these things as cheaply as possible, and we're getting a lot of compromises. I had an example. The development's nearly finished. It's on Maddox Road. And what the state government did there was they, instead of having a central skip bin, they actually, in their development, are now having residents share between each other, between two units, a wheelie bin. And there's not really a good hard stand area for these things at all. And I can just see these bins being left permanently on the nature strips and people coming to blows because old mates filled the bin up and there's no more room in this one. These are just really minor issues from the state government, but the fallout can be quite significant for a neighbourhood. And I think we need to engage local councillors so that we can point out some of these issues, put a little bit of pressure on the state government because our submissions are now public. And if there is a fallout, we can at least demonstrate to the community that we've done our job as local representatives, trying to make something as good as it possibly can be. I don't want to stuff around with your motion because I think it's a really good one, but I think there's something to be said with including ministerial infrastructure designations in there as well, alongside public housing developments. You see this with schools, schools that are not providing sufficient car parking. I think if we're aware of an MID and we note that, hey, you're not providing enough car parking for your staff and this will lead to issues, it would be useful if at least our submission, our response, is also public document and that those councillor concerns are captured as well. So, I don't want to move an amendment or anything. But
I'm actually happy to incorporate that. My experience with ministerial infrastructure designations is that we often receive that correspondence directly. And so we actually have an opportunity to respond, but I don't know what everyone else's experience has been with that.
And I'm sure that it's the case that we'd have an opportunity to respond. However, our responses don't appear online with PD Online. And that's
so can we just change paragraph 1 to say state government notification of public housing developments and ministerial infrastructure designation projects or something like that?
Yeah. Thanks, Mr Chairman.
Councillor Gates.
Chairman, in addition to what Councillor Vorster's just said, I just wanted to highlight an issue that I have at the Coomera Special School. It's only officially been opened this year and I've already had a request from the principal for council to provide more parking. For the teaching staff has apparently grown incredibly, as have the student numbers, and there's nowhere for us to provide extra parking. The school's developed. They don't consult with us for their plans. And all of a sudden, now that there's traffic chaos in what is a cul-de-sac, we're left trying to see. I've actually written back and suggested that they get the state down to see if they can reconfigure the newly built car park to provide a drop and go area, or whether there's any more available land in Galaxy Way at Coomera that the state can purchase so that they can provide the right amount of car parking, especially at a special school where there are circumstances that require extreme safety for the people being delivered to that school.
Very good example. Councillor McDonald and Councillor Owen Jones.
Just a question with something that you raised there that about the height in a with an uplift of 3 stories and they're looking at 4. I have a real worry there about how the flow-on impact on any future development in that area. if it goes to court. You know how we have the developers come in, they do all their little red dots, you know, about all these developments that have been allowed this high. Would that have a major flow-on impact on future developments in that area that applicants can then come in and say, well, look, you've allowed a 4-storey there.
Yeah. Well, look, it's most definitely, I would categorise it as a risk that we would then be exposed to that could be completely avoided if the state government simply sticks to the city plan.
Yeah.
The other worry for me, for example, around the Runaway Bay one is that there's no visitor parking and it's adjacent to Bayview Street, which has a travel lane and a yellow line. I just don't know how that's going to work. So there's a whole range of reasons why there should be local input into these processes, and a strong message sent that the people who live in these houses don't deserve to have to go through some different or lesser standard of living and accessibility just because it's social housing that's being provided. They should also be able to have people come and visit them and park comfortably and have services provided to them, footpaths. You know, there's always people that are responding to them for social needs. Where are they going to park? So, yeah. Councillor Jones, sorry.
Councillor Caldwell, it was the Planning Regulation 2017 which makes a provision for community residents' land to be used in exempt development where it meets the applicable definition, blah, blah, blah. So what it enabled them to do is to do assisted living for 6 people plus 1 on-site worker. So, and there was no notification, there's no requirement to notify it. But I think that it's something that the report could maybe explore, because in my mind, it's not going to take the state long to actually start going down that path in regards to the redevelopment of some of their sites. And it would just, to me, make sense that that forms part of their notification process. So I don't think we're opposed to the delivery of good outcomes. It just has to be good outcomes. So, so Councillor McDonald started today's meeting referring to people being priced out of suburbs and where they live. The state's delivery of housing stock, in part, can prevent that, and that's a good thing that we should encourage them to do. They just need to do the right thing and build the right product in the right place.
Did they adhere to flood levels in that construction in Crescent Ave?
They were exempt.
So, I mean, we contemplated a small unit development just down the road where we were extremely vigilant in our level of concern and attention given to flood levels because of the nature of that street. So that is extremely concerning to me.
So Councillor Caldwell, it's well on its way to being finished. So maybe next time you're near Coombe Avenue, you should have a look, because it's out of character. It's this thumping big thing that, and residents just can't comprehend that it's effectively exempt and it's privately certified. It actually didn't come anywhere near council, and we can't do anything about it. But it's in a street that was constructed in the 50s, where when we get a king tide, there's water that laps up in, and let alone a flood. It's just nuts.
Is that where we had a recent debate where we had those references to those?
Yeah, we had non-habitable
on the other side of the channel.
Oh my gosh!
Yeah, same.
Are you kidding me?
Same hydraulic supply across that whole catchment.
So the reality is the 6 residents that are NDIS and are going to be above, they will be above Q100, but they'll need in the event of an emergency, they'll need the ADF or somebody to wade in there with an aqueduct.
Boats.
All right, I think we appear to be heading in the direction of unanimous support for this.
Outstanding.
All right, anyone else want to make a contribution? We'll take the vote. All in favour? Against? It's carried. Oh, sorry, I moved it. I had moved it and Councillor Peter Young had seconded it. Sorry, it's not on the screen. All right, thanks, councillors. Any other items of general business? Otherwise, we'll call the meeting closed at 11:29 a.m.